my good friend Nick Tenconi. Nick, how you doing?
Very well, Father. Thank you very much for having me on.
Not at all. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure as always.
You are the new leader of UKIP.
Yes, I find myself in the illustrious position to make Britain great again. The opportunity has arrived at my doorstep, and we're going to do everything we can. And in 5 years' time, we're voting our way out of this.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Well, we'll get to UKIP. We'll get to your political ambitions, but I want to start actually with your faith, because you're a Christian man and you're in a campaign called Disciples for Christ. Tell us a little bit about that. What's the objective?
Sure. So, I suppose a few years ago, after I'd re-emerged, got myself back into politics, bearing in mind being a practicing Christian, I wanted to know more about Christian action in the UK. So a good starting point for that is to put Christian action into Google, or Christian action in the UK into Google. You won't find an awful lot.
Right.
You'll find a lot of legal stuff, which is world class. You'll find a lot around free speech, which again is world class. You'll find an awful lot of people helping. You'll find an awful lot of street preaching and evangelizing as well. You'll find an awful lot, but not what I was looking for,
right,
which is the muscular Christianity that we need and want to see and that's missing at street level to stand up to all of the battalions of Satan's army, whether it's far left extremists, Marxists, communists, those suffering with liberal narcissistic personality disorder, woke soldiers, race baiters, race warriors, obviously Islamists. Now, after October 7th, good always comes out of bad. After October 7th, we were ramping up to understand, actually, wait a minute, we need to draw people's attention to Arab colonialization, to Arab imperialism, to Islamism, to the threat of radical Islam, which has been said by many a conservative and Labour politician over the last couple of decades. The facts speak for themselves, but we just don't have the street presence.
Right.
But I believed that the conviction and the want and desire and motivations there simply just wasn't there. So as ever, as activists, before anything else, we decided to put that together and launched in May of this year.
Okay, wonderful. So I've been out campaigning with you a few times, previously with Turning Point UK, and this was part of the anti-drag queen storytime hour, where there are grown men scantily clad, dressed as women, reading to children. This is abhorrent, and everyone with common sense should be against it. Certainly everyone watching the show is pretty much against it, I'm sure. But we started doing that, which was obviously very secular. Did you come to the conclusion that actually that was good but not enough, and that you needed to be out on the streets with an explicitly Christian message? Because Disciples for Christ, I've been with you outside the Azerbaijani embassy, for example, fighting for the Armenian Christians who are being persecuted in Artsakh and that kind of thing. What kind of made you go from one to the other?
So when I envisaged my return to politics, this was circa 2019. This was before Wuhan in November. So I saw what was happening with the globalist agenda, like a lot of people, ahead of autumn 19. So my plan was always to re-emerge in politics and to put Christianity back into the heart of government and back into the hearts and minds of the populace. So that's never gone anywhere. And there's also the proverbial feeling one has inside with regards to one's purpose and why they are here. Outside of charity, faith, hope, and being a good Christian, or aspiring to be a good Christian. So the situation that gets put to me is that how can you have Christianity and politics? How can you tread this line, and how can you achieve? So in terms of MO, to answer your question, from day one, I've already known that it's about making Britain great again with Christianity,
right,
through Christianity. The appetite's there, the motivation is there, people need to be led. And in 5 years' time, that's exactly what they're going to see. Very similar to some of the backgrounds we've got here right now, in terms of the sentiment and in terms of the historical interpretation and meaning. It is defending the most innocent and vulnerable within society, and is standing up for that which is righteous and correct. And I can think of no more prevalent time than the sentiment requirement for that as we speak, and in the build-up to, again, what's going to happen in 5 years' time.
Absolutely. I think you're right in that people are looking for something, and they may not know what they're looking for. I would say they're looking for Jesus, but in practical terms, they're looking for a muscular Christianity. They're looking for an answer to the vagueness and the modernity and the abhorrent kind of degeneracy they see all around them. They want something better. They want something good. And so is part of your journey offering a different opinion, a different perspective? Because if we take this to a literal example, the riots, the recent protests, and some of them turned into riots, people were looking for an outlet, but they didn't necessarily have a positive outlet. Is that part of what you're trying to provide?
Yeah, so I mean, to the point, it's an incredibly important one. So, for example, at Turning Point UK, which I'm Chief Operations Officer of, we've always put to politicians and across social media that it's absolutely essential that social conservatives and Christians aren't silenced. It is absolutely essential that we reject ethno-nationalism and far-right extremism. If you don't listen to these people who are socially conservative, normal people, you are opening up the pathway for radicalisation. We have spent years putting countermeasures in place with the government and trying with politicians to make that point understood. And was it listened to? Well, no, it wasn't listened to. So, of course, you need to, that's the most important. But also, of course, young men nowadays, modernity, etc., the tech rev, porn, lack of purpose, the feminism that has captured the hearts and minds, environmentalism, LGBTQ plus rights. It's not just men that need purpose, it's women. And women have been given that purpose because they've been manipulated psychologically to view everything through the lens of emotion, justice and righteousness, rather than historical context and reason and logic, which of course both genders are completely capable of. So a huge disservice has been done there to those individuals. So then we turn to the problem that men face, and we see that the problem just keeps going round and round and round. If one gender has a problem in that regard, then it's going to hit the other gender also. Yeah. So we notice that also men have a huge problem with addiction, with instant gratification, with a lack of purpose, a lack of identity. A man's purpose, a man's identity is inextricably linked to his culture and his faith. That's what gives a man not just purpose, but meaningful purpose. So it's absolutely essential that we make it clear that in our politics going forward, and a key differentiator with other on the right parties, is that we're going to put Christianity, faith, duty, sacrifice at the heart of our mission. And that's also what it's going to take to get us out of this mess. And it's going to re-inspire millions of men across the world, whilst we also, if we could have anything else loaded to our plate, right the wrongs of degenerates like Andrew Tate, who have totally failed young men. And there's lots of other examples where these young men were looking for something, found it, and were led further down a wrong path. And we're going to right that wrong. That falls on our soldiers as disciples of Christ.
I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said, but this is why I've agreed to work with you. But I think there will be people watching this who want to push back on one particular point there, which is the being against ethno-nationalism. So if I understand it, your perspective is that we are against a multicultural society because a society needs a predominant culture. But that doesn't mean you can't be against a multi-ethnic society because pigmentation and skin color should be irrelevant. Could you elaborate a bit more on what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, sure. So when my understand this topic has become incredibly important, and I'm a bit confused as to where some people's misinterpretations. Like I'm talking about neo-Nazis. Yeah. I'm talking about when we talk about the far right. Unless of course there's a new definition of far right. So I always knew it as one, and that is that if you're white, you're in, and if you're not, you're out. Right. That's simply not a value that I hold. But obviously, if we want to talk about multiculturalism, that's a separate conversation. So it's important to break it down, and then I can give more specific answers. But I think that we should be standing up to, when we talk about the far right, we should be talking about neo-Nazis.
Yes, because we are all painted as far right for having opinions that are just right of the centre, and that's obviously a nonsense used to shut us down. So sticking with the protests, obviously a lot of people are upset, a lot of people are angry, a lot of people want to make those opinions and those feelings known to the establishment. Some people went about it the wrong way, but people need a way to outlet. The results of that were that the establishment clamped down on people, on ordinary working class British people, being called far-right thugs, potentially calling us all neo-Nazis. And we've seen this two-tier policing, we've seen the two-tier judiciary, we've seen two-tier media and two-tier politicians. What do you make of all of this?
So this is why it's so important, your previous point, this is why it's so important to make it very clear when we talk about ethno-nationalists and ethno-nationalist sentiment. This is precisely the point. Everyone who's a social conservative is branded to be that entity. Yeah. So you have to make a distinction, whether people on the right like it or not. The issue that you're talking about now is two-tier policing. And two-tier policing is now the catchphrase. We need to be more specific. It's two-tier governance, two-tier judiciary, two-tier policing, two-tier law. Yeah. It's not just two-tier policing. That's about cops on the front line and what they do and don't do, and how they do and don't interpret the law, and how they do and don't apply to it. We see it all the time with Christian preaching. We never see it when the Islamic members put up their tents and dish out their Quran. We never see it in that regard. So let's get down to some basic facts. What you mentioned a few times that people need an outlet. If you're throwing Molotovs, you go to prison.
Right.
If you're setting fire to things, you go to prison. But mean words over Facebook at 10:59 at night after the third glass of wine, held in context, punishment, but prison, let's have a question there. There's been 1,000 arrests and over 500 charges, and 100 people have gone to jail. Now, jails are at max, knife crimes running riot. Criminals aren't incentivized to put down the blade if they know they're not going to get time under a liberal government. In context of two-tier judiciary, we've got a chap who owned an X account called Wayne O'Rourke. Sick of it was his Twitter handle. Yeah. Now, most right-wingers would have been following him, not agreeing with everything he said and did, of course, and held under scrutiny, but the vast majority of what he said, bearing in mind no one knows anyone's true motivations when they're from behind the keyboard, is he's got 3 years for stirring up racial hatred.
What? I didn't know that. And
for posting misinformation online. Now, one of the tweets, let's be very clear, so I'm going to be fair, one of the tweets said, it suggested that he was praising the burning of a car. Now, let's be very clear about this. If you burn a car, if you throw Molotovs, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
Now, in this life, there's a difference between saying things and doing things. So when we talk about two-tier judiciary, I'm going to give a few examples, and then I want to counter that with some of the examples in society where we see people getting away with absolute murder.
Because even when you're saying things, there's a difference between saying and inciting. Saying, I like that, is very different from saying, go and do that.
Well, quite. And I think these are the nuances that we need to talk about. But the truth is, I think that most people in society, whether they're left or right or social conservatives, people know that we've got two-tier judiciary. People know we've got a police state on our hands now, and there's a communist running the country. We've also got two lads from Leeds saying silly things and sharing, quote-unquote, derogatory memes about migrants. Right. Sharing derogatory memes about migrants.
I better not look at my phone then, because I'm going to prison.
Well, we'll be sharing. Oh no, they won't put us together because we can't. They don't allow right wingers to team up against the Islamists. But we'll come on to that. Julie Sweeney, she's got 15 months. This is a 53-year-old woman. Lived a quiet life. They did it all in court. Lived a quiet life. Didn't really hurt anyone. No form, etc. Got 15 months for putting something really stupid on Facebook. And what she put was really stupid. Right. And she deserves to be punished. But jail time for saying something on Facebook, now that's interesting. Yeah. But again, I'm not excusing it at all. I'm simply saying, to give the contrast, we've got a former school governor, Steve Malin, who's got 26 months, this is from the Hartlepool protest, 26 months in jail for gesticulating and shouting at officers.
I saw this one. It was absolutely ridiculous.
So we've got the outrage, haven't we? We've got drag queen story hour. We've got Islamists running riot after October 7th. And now we've got two-tier judiciary and policing. So we've got the outrage, but it gets better. We've also got grossly offensive messages, which is contrary to Section 1271A and 3 of the Communications Act 2003. That would be Tony Blair's reign of terror.
Act, yep.
Those two are jailed for 8 weeks. A couple of young lads in Cumbria. They're jailed for 8 weeks. They put a graphic of a group of Asian men, quote unquote, and then the caption read, "Coming to a town near you."
Right.
8 weeks in prison.
It's true. It's accurate.
Factually accurate. Facts aren't racist.
No.
And now there's a sort of Minority Report feel. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that film. There's also a caption on one of these graphics which said, "When it's on your turf, then what?" So these are some of the examples that are very important to go through with regards to two-tier judiciary, not just two-tier policing. Because two-tier policing aggravates people. Yeah. But two-tier judiciary,
you end up in
now
jail.
We're all in huge betrayal. Now, if you go onto Wikipedia and you do the protest right research, you'll find that there's this ambition by Wikipedia to put right, far right, and they link the groups. Okay. And then over on the left, or over on the other column, they put counter-protest groups. And in there is the Muslim Defense League.
Oh, come on.
Very interesting, isn't it? So the counter-protests, and there's a whole list of them. They might as well put Antifa in there as well, because they're just counter-protests, not far-left extremists and not Islamists.
How they get away with it?
The propaganda. So every single BBC article rubbing their hands with glee that they could say far right.
Right.
And even put it in pink blinking neon as well before the actual article. Guardian examples, all far right. Starmer's vitriol, even now doubling down. Going back to what you said about the need for people to be heard and to vent and to have someone fight their corner because they don't want mass uncontrolled immigration and they want an end to Islamism, for example. Starmer's doubled down.
And these are ordinary folk. These aren't the EDL as the mainstream media painted them to be, forgetting the fact that the EDL doesn't exist anymore. These are ordinary British folk who are upset.
Phantom EDL, whatever you want to call it, is ordinary British folk with ordinary jobs. Your neighbours, my neighbours. Yeah. You may get on with them, you might not. These are ordinary people coming to a town near you, type of stuff.
But by labelling them as EDL, they're able to say, well, the MDL is a counter-protest against the EDL. But actually, there is no EDL. So the MDL are not even a counter-protest. They are out there rioting themselves and getting away with it.
So let's talk about that. So we've all seen the video that went viral of a community liaison officer addressing a group of Muslim youths saying verbatim, you need to go back to the mosques now and put your weapons down. That went viral. A lot of these guys that don't cover their faces, we've got facial recognition everywhere, causing people an awful lot of problem. They get away with that. That went viral. You've also got the Muslim Defense League in, I want to say it was Birmingham, it's the pub on the corner. They deliberately incited, they deliberately persecuted the pub, they deliberately went in and they caused, extreme anxiety, distress, alarm, whatever, which comes into the violent disorder bracket because you need more than 2 of you to be part of a violent disorder. Right. So if you've got a mob, that's why the law is there. Maximum penalty 5 years. We haven't seen anything in them, and this is the bit about two-tier media, linking all the points. We don't see anything about that in the media. No. And certainly not in the legacy media or the mainstream media. So you get the vitriol just pointed at concerned citizens and patriots because of the actions of maybe 1% who definitely deserve prison time.
Well, the media turn a blind eye, but when they do address it, they'll say that, well, this was largely a peaceful protest, despite the bombing of cars and destroying of pubs and hitting of people with machetes or wooden blocks.
And also, let's then, in that vein, before there are more examples, let's go to Hare Hills and the riots there. That was migrant-led. And there was an announcement from the Islamic community that was nothing to do with Muslims. I saw the footage. I heard what was said. Is a lie. Yeah. Nothing from legacy media. Nothing from the media whatsoever. Burning out cars, setting buses alight, etc. All migrant-based violent disorder and rioting.
Well, the recent stabbing of this week, there was a Sky News interview with Theo, what's his name, Underrush or something, and Yasmin Ali Barbie Brown, and they were saying, oh, well, we can't really talk about who did the crime or where he came from because it will incite the far right. Like, they're not interested in the victims of the stabbing. They're not interested in the truth or allowing people to say, well, actually, I know where this person is. Let's find him. Well, all they're interested in is protecting the diversity and multiculturalism that they've made idols of.
And let's look at Manchester Terminal 2, the 2 guys who were involved in battering armed police officers. Right. In any country in the world, other than UK, they'd have been shot. And justifiably so. Since 9/11, at an airport, you don't mess around. No. Everyone knows that. Hands behind the back, get down on your knees, that's it. They battered those cops. They walk the streets free now. Interesting. Yeah. Violent disorder, you need more than 2 people. The mother was present. They battered those cops. They're free to walk the streets. Pro-Palestinian activists smashed the windows of Barclays Bank after October 7th last year when the marches were at the height. I believe it may have even been this year. They walked free. The Bristol Four for toppling the statue in Bristol under Somerset and Avon police. I forget the name of the mayor, but the police were ordered to stand down. Yeah. Mobs of far left vigilantes doing what they wanted, how they wanted, when they wanted, tearing down statues illegally, and they all got away with it. That's without mentioning the BLM riots, in contrast to what we've seen with regards to 2-tier judiciary, but also 2-tier governance. The DIE, diversity, inclusion, equality agenda, is revered by the liberal establishment, as you said quite rightly so a second ago. You've got all these problems that come with potentially ethnic minorities or migrants or multiculturalism or Islamism, and the idea is to not talk about them because in case it brings out the far right, rather than say far right, rather than saying we've got issues and we need to deal with them and playing a straight bat. So it goes into that totalitarian propaganda, far left tactic, bearing in mind out of the 80 prescribed organizations in the country, 57 are Islamic. 6 out of the 80 are what you call ethno-nationalist or neo-Nazi.
But they're not able to address the problem. do you think it's out of fear and cowardice, or do you think it's a malevolent agenda? Because they'll say, we can't talk about this because it will inspire the far right. So they're afraid of the far right. They're afraid of a boogeyman that doesn't really exist in this country, but they're not afraid of the actual Mohammedans that are, or any other demographic that are causing problems, such as the Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs.
Well, let's link this again to multiculturalism,
Right.
rather than talking about anything else to do with ethno or ethna. Let's talk about multiculturalism. It's almost two theories. One is the establishment and law enforcement are paralyzed by fear to do anything. Because if they do, maybe they lose their funding from whoever pays them to bring in the migrants. Are we ready to have that uncomfortable conversation yet? Is it fear that they would lose the backhanded deals? Is it fear they would lose the funding? Is it fear that they'd be called a racist? Is it fear that they'd lose the support of the liberal backbone of the country? So fear's got a lot to do with it. You mentioned malevolent agenda. There is no question that the second item with regards to explaining why this madness, when we talk about two-tier XYZ, is happening, there is a globalist agenda. And it is a far-left communist agenda. It is one world. It is no boundaries, no anything. Now, no one quite knows the outcome of that yet, no matter how hard you study Davos or guys like Schwab, for example. No one quite knows the outcome, but we know that it's satanic because it's about rejecting and turning over masculinity, rejecting and ending sovereignty and control of your borders. And obviously nothing's changed in 2,000 years. What we're looking at is the persecution of Holy Mother Church and of Christianity. That right of man, for example, testosterone. And that's seen across society. So is there a malevolent agenda? I'd say 100%. Can we prove it or do anything about it? Well, we'll see.
Okay.
But you can clearly see that it's unfolding. But the thing we should address, that which we can control, is that as the establishment is terrified, clearly, of doing anything in line with an agenda. Right. In 5 years' time, we vote our way out of this with fearless leadership.
Okay. And when you say we vote our way out of this, what are we voting our way out of? Mass immigration, mass communism, the two-tiered system. Where do we vote?
Yeah. So we're voting to draw your attention to UKIP's 6 missions as we rebrand. We're going to declare war on far-left extremism. So that covers off on woke, diversity, inclusion, equality, liberal narcissistic personality disorder, far-left totalitarian propaganda, woke ideology, etc., interfering with children at school, Marxists in our institutions. So declare war on far-left extremism means actually addressing what needs to be addressed within society. Obviously, in terms of immigration, it's very simple. Freeze immigration for 5 years, close the borders, bar certain refugees from certain countries, which may or may not have to happen depending on where they're from. For example, Christian women and children who are fleeing Islamic persecution.
Right, so not fighting age Islamic men, but the opposite, the people that they are persecuting, the women and the children.
Yeah, right. When we say close the borders, of course, we'll always allow refugees in because we're not unkind as a nation. We are far too tolerant, but we are not unkind. So obviously immigration needs to be sorted out. UKIP pledges to build a seawall. We're going to line from point A to point B, spikes, fences. Again, if you look into it, actually, it can be done very cheaply. From point A to point B, good luck trying to go around that. It's not going to work. So when those dinghies arrive, it'll be if you go try your luck, you can try. But if you sink your ship, you're sinking your ship. Okay. So we need to stop illegal immigration. But we also need to get our hands around legal migration as well. I want to just draw your audience's attention to a few bits and pieces. Okay. Illegal immigration is a crime, and anything illegal here needs to be deported. But in terms of legal migration, those people that are here who add no value to our country or to our system, but take an awful lot more from the taxpayer in the state, should not be here. Now, let's just say, for example, that everyone's lost their mind and you have to justify to the nth degree with numbers because people still aren't bought into the fact that we've got a serious problem on our hands. Let's just talk about our grassroots and house prices. The net effect of mass uncontrolled immigration is that no one can afford to buy a house. It's simple supply and demand mathematics. 72% of people born in Somalia but live in England and Wales reside in council housing. Another example, Afghanis. The total households are 34,837. 36%, 12,641, are in social housing. Iraqi households, there are 46,263 Iraqi households. 15,641, 33.8% are on social housing.
Right.
8 million quid a day to fund the housing of illegals.
So all of these large minorities are just unsustainable. So what the plan is, repatriation?
Mass deportations. So the question then becomes, well, who do you deport? If you are in this country and you are not a British citizen and you take more than you give, and that is because if you're going to have refugees or if you're going to have foreign people here, there has to be some sort of transition period. You have to allow them, if they're going to be here, you have to allow them to get integrated and assimilated into society.
Right.
But there is a cutoff point. So if you are here and you are taking more than you are providing, producing, giving, why are you here? We're already at max. We're completely overstretched and overstrained, and our grassroots can't aspire to get a house, get married, and have kids because you can't. They all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You need to. You want a family. You need a home. You need to provide some stability. So, obviously, 6 missions with UKIP. A lot of talk about immigration and about deportations and solutions, not just death by numbers, but actual solutions. We need to also end and remove radical Islam from Britain, from planet Earth, but from Britain. That means the 40,000 Islamists that are on MI5 watch lists. No point putting them into the prisons because they run riot, they take over, and there's forced conversions.
So we need a reconquista. The problem is a lot of these Islamist extremists are too extreme for Islamic countries. You know, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, they don't let them in. Yeah, we take them all in. So I think you're right. We need a way to repel them, if not deport them.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of deportations, if you're a British citizen, that's problematic. So you've got to break down between that which is a citizen and which isn't. But in terms of the 40,000 on MI5's watch list, they need to be detained.
Okay.
Again, look at Saudi, look at Qatar, look at the message from many imams saying, we have our religion, we have our cultural practices and values. We want nothing to do with radical Islam. We're all on the same page. You'd have to be insane to not agree that radical Islam has to be dealt with and addressed. We're also going to call out and educate on problems to do with liberalism and godlessness, which are, again, root cause problems with regards to the collapse of society, degeneracy, and a void created for young men to not aspire to do or want to do anything good.
On the topic of godlessness, the news today is that the Labour Party are going to ban smoking in the few places that you're still allowed to smoke because they want to clamp down on what they call a preventable death. Now, we know the biggest cause of death in this country is abortion. 250,000 babies are killed every year in this country. Where do you fall on the sanctity of life?
So is it 70 million a year? Is that right? It's 250,000 in Britain, or is that
250,000 a year in Britain?
In Britain, it's 70
a million a year in America.
In America, that's it, right? So I'll be there on September 7th, along with lots of other people. March for Life. Obviously, if you're a practicing Christian, you stand against abortion, whether that makes you pro-life or anti-abortion. You understand what the 10 Commandments are. Thou shalt not kill. And a fetus is a child, living human being. So we need to put Christianity back into the heart of government. And people are going to have to pick sides. Let's not forget, revered Margaret Thatcher, right? Not everything she did was perfect. So we're going to put culture first over the economy. Lots of things are going to have to change. We need to reinvigorate people's purpose, and we need to stand up for the most vulnerable and innocent within society. But obviously, calling out on liberalism and godlessness is vital. We need to remove corporatism and end or sanction ESG as well. That's a huge part of what we want to try and do. And of course, all that's achievable by putting culture first, if you put culture over money. And last but not least is to place Christianity, Christian culture, British culture, and British people and British business first before anything else.
Music to my ears. Now, how are you going to rebrand UKIP?
Well, I suppose there's a natural style and flair from yours truly that should hopefully reinvigorate and remotivate a few people. We're going to change the logo.
Okay, you're going to get rid of the pound symbol?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, good. Maybe a British Isles or something?
Something a bit spicier than that.
Oh, okay. All right, we like spicy.
We're not going to let you down, Father.
Okay, good.
But there's some basic things around. There's some changes that need to be made.
Yeah.
So the last 8 years, there's some changes that need to be made. Yep. Those changes are being made. We are going to let the people, the working class, social conservatives and Christians wake up to the fact that a mass return home to UKIP is the option, the only option, because we must put culture first, economy second. And that if that means going back economically to go forward culturally, to then re-emerge, we have to think of our children's children and children.
The measure of a successful country is not the GDP. It's not how much money comes in or out. There are far more important things, such as the faith, such as the culture, such as people's well-being, that the government seem to have forgotten. So I'm glad you're considering all of those. Nick, I could talk to you all day, and we'll get you back on regularly for updates, absolutely. But thank you so much for coming in. God bless you, and go at it.
God bless you. Thanks for having me, Calvin.
Cheers. Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.